Hello. As soon as 0.5.3 came out, I posted a vid of all my builds, and some of them were quite experimental, basically stuff I hoped would work out in 0.5.3, but a lot of them honestly didn't work out, and I have changed a lot of the builds, so I feel it's vital that I go over my builds again and show you what I've chosen now. As far as I know, Kutuzov, pretty sure, yeah, these are all the same as the stuff I used before. The first important change is probably the Taiho. Instead of going for the repair, I obviously go for the faster torpedo acceleration. That's honestly the only significant change regarding the Taiho. And of course I put the 1 point I have into basic firing training instead of getting the expert rear gunners. The reason is that your anti-air is actually quite strong now, and buffing it is a good idea. Both the Hakuryu and the Taiyo have gotten significantly better anti-air. It used to be a joke, but with the recent buffs to the anti-air, putting a point there to improve your survivability isn't a bad idea at all. The Hakuryu as well has gotten a really beefy anti-air now, which is good because in the past they used to have very weak anti-air, whereas the Midway and Essex and Lexington all had really good anti-air. So that's a significant change. What else? On the Des Moines, I have spec'd, I think this is the same spec as I used to before, the full points, Vigilance and Superintendent. I'm pretty sure this is the same spec I used before. The gearing though, here I've changed some things up. I am using Concealment, Torpedo Armament Expertise and Last Stand. Vigilance instead of Superintendent, because I feel this is one of the significant changes. The new buffed Vigilance is simply so good that I think it's worth more than getting the additional smoke and AA. And honestly, I've had a much more fun on my gearing after changing to this new spec, so this is something I highly recommend. Sometimes you might run out of smokes running this build, but running out of smokes at the very end of a game is much better than eating a torp or two that you could have avoided if you had Vigilance. So definitely specking it Vigilance, and then as usual Demolition Expert and Concealment. On the Montana, I tried a heavy anti-air build, but honestly it wasn't really worth it because carriers are still so rare that you simply don't run into enough of them to justify the usage of basically wasting 2 4-point perks on anti-air. So in the end, my new revised build, so to say, is, well, this is with a 15-point captain, but I've taken Situation Awareness, Basics of Survivability, and basic buff to both anti-air and secondaries, Turret Traverse, since it's the only one worth taking in T2. And here I have both Superintendent and, of course, the new buffed Vigilance. This skill is so good that it's very hard to argue against taking it on almost any ship right now. The Vigilance is simply so strong. The last 3 points that I get I will probably put into High Alert for faster repair. Now there's some argument about which one is actually better, Advanced Firing Training or Manual Fire Control. The thing is, the Manual Fire Control only works for 85mm or larger guns, and that basically only means these guns. But the thing with Montana is that your other guns, these 40mm Bofors, actually do really insane damage, as does these. So it's a bit arguable which one is better. Personally, I prefer going for Advanced Firing Training because it also buffs the range of your secondaries, which you still have 10 of them, and buffing it to 6 kilometers is quite nice because you got a nice fire chance on them and they pump out a lot of shells, which can be useful, and you still get the anti-air bonus, which is obviously fantastic. So which one you choose here is kind of up to you, but I'm of the opinion that I think Advanced Firing Training is actually the superior choice here. Another ship that I've changed my build on is the Khabarovs. I tried a experimental build with preventive maintenance, but as far as I, through my own testing, can tell, is that the minus 50% risk of incapacitation doesn't affect over-penetrative shells. So you still get those random shells that completely instantly destroy a turret. Not the thing that basically they're first knocked out, first crippled and then destroyed, but instantly destroyed. And this perk seems to have no effect on that instant destruction. So I've spec'd out of it because it wasn't worth it. It would have been worth it if it would have been a flat out minus 50% chance of turret destruction, but it's not. It's only for one of the occasions that destroy your turrets. So my new build is situation awareness, and of course the gun buff, torpedo buff, and last stand. Once again, I no longer take superintendent, I take vigilance, because Khabarovsk is so fast you really need to react in time or get plenty of warning to be able to avoid torps comfortably. Advanced firing training for the range. It puts you at a nice 15.6 kilometer range. And finally stealth, because once again it was between these two which one was the better, and ultimately preventive maintenance didn't live up to my expectations. It simply wasn't worth it. So this is another spec that I have revised. Zao and the Hindenburg, I'm pretty sure I still have the same spec. The Hindenburg is actually the only ship here that I don't use, that I haven't changed to vigilance on, because I consider superintendent to be so good, because I use obviously the German hydroacoustics. And the German hydroacoustics is fantastic and makes you practically immune to destroyers. So that's a lot of time you can spend being immune to DDs. So I think the fact that you have hydro justifies using superintendent over vigilance. On my Sao, of course, I have both of them. Yeah, nothing has changed there. And once again, on the Hindenburg, I also took advanced firing training instead of the manual fire control, because here we come to the same issue of basically, sure, your max range guns here, these are 55, like these are the only guns that are over 85mm, and as you can see the damage is 146, which is certainly good, but then if you look at this 55mm, you have 246 DPS, and obviously increasing the range to get to this point is very, very nice. So once again, there can be some argument, but I took the one that also boosts my secondaries. I personally prefer advanced firing training for the simple reason that it buffs both aspects, both the secondaries and the end tier, whereas this one only works for the end tier and only for the 85mm, and only if you focus on that squad. So I feel like this one has too many limitations to justify using it over advanced firing training. Finally, on the Yamato, I tried a spec where I used the secondary build, and it was garbage. Basically, the real problem here comes down to the fact that the secondary spec basically relies on the enemy being willing to brawl with you. But no one really wants to brawl with the Yamato. Everyone flees, everyone avoids you, everyone bombs you and torps you from range. And you guys know how incredibly aggressive I am in my playstyle, and even I couldn't make the Yamato secondary build work. So ultimately I found the secondary build to be a goddamn failure. So I respect, of course, situation awareness and basic survivability. These are like bread and butter for a lot of ships. Turret traverse, and then I get superintendent, vigilance to avoid the torps, a faster reload or repair to deal with flooding and fire, and finally advanced firing training. Here again, there can be some argument which one is better. We need to look at the anti-air once more. And this ship actually has two sets of batteries that could benefit from this mod. But you see 61 DPS, and then we look at these, 281. So which one ultimately is better? Giving a 100% boost to these two, or buffing this one as well as buffing your secondaries, which you have a lot of. So with this build you still get 8.4 kilometer range on your secondaries. So once again, I prefer advanced firing training for the multitude of purposes it has. Whether you feel the same is up to you. The last point I will obviously be putting into basic firing training, once again to buff both my end tier and my secondaries. But I'm still quite far away from the last point. Anyway, that was my revised build, or revised Captain Perks guide, where I changed a lot of the builds I used in the earlier guide. I had to try them, and I gave them a couple of them I gave a few days, couple of them I gave a few weeks, but they simply didn't work out. So ultimately these are the final builds that I have ended up with in 0.5.3. Anyway, I hope you guys got something out of it. I'll talk to you later.